Hey, psych students, how are you doing? All right, sitting out here in my usual grading spot in the big Truax building. Got the big windows behind me. I hope it doesn't create too much glare. I've got a couple of interesting kid trophies here. I'd like to talk to you real quickly. You recently finished an assignment, and I had you look up the fundamental attribution error as it related to psychological disorders and mental illness. I think a lot of you really understood what that term meant and reflected on it nicely. I want to just follow up real quick and kind of just add to the learning, if we could, a little bit. So the fundamental attribution error tells us and teaches us that in an individualistic society where we're mostly taught to kind of think about ourselves, kind of what's in it for me, my goals, things like that, that we are at risk of making this error, and they call it the fundamental attribution error because it's to what do we attribute behavior. So when I see someone engage in a behavior, what's the attribution I make about why they make that behavior? And the fundamental error in this attribution is that we overemphasize individuals' personal characteristics without taking into account historical and other situational factors. Okay, so this is actually super important. So I got this kind of humorous way to show you this. So got two trophies here. This trophy is a third place trophy, and I'm looking at it, and it's when I was age 8. It's for football, pass, punt, and kick. So I competed in these competitions. So this is a third place trophy when I was age 8. I actually have several other trophies in the sequence here, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And those trophies are all generally third and second place, mostly third place. Then I have this puppy right here, my prized puppy from 1970 something. I was age 13, and this, I don't know if you can tell the difference, this is gold. This means I got first place, okay? So I was 8 years old, I got third place. I have several third places and a second place between the sequence where I became 13-year-old, and I finally won first place. Okay, like stunning, right? Okay, so what's the story you think goes behind that? What do you think happened from being 8 years old and getting third place and being 13 years old and getting first place? If you think about it for a second, it seems real plausible to tell the story that I worked really hard and that I set a lot of goals, and that it was because of my determination and my work effort and my skill development that, finally, after all those years, I was able to achieve first place. And that seems like a good story, except it's the wrong story, right? It's actually making the fundamental attribution error. So not only do we make the fundamental attribution error when we look at people like with regards to a problematic behavior, but even a good behavior, we, especially for ourselves, make the fundamental attribution error when we do something well, right? So here I did something well, got the first place. Here's the fundamental attribution error. Guess what? Kids number 1 and 2 who had beat me every year that I got this dastardly third place trophy didn't show up this year. So while yes, I worked hard, while yes, I stayed committed, while yes, I had a goal, and without all of those characteristics within myself, this wouldn't have been possible. Still, the real story behind why this happened, kind of simplifying it, is that the guys that beat me all the time just didn't show up. Okay, and so in our individualistic society, and let's understand that when we use individualistic, collectivistic, neither is all good or all bad. They have characteristics that have pros and cons. But it's really easy in a society where we're kind of taught to think about ourselves, we're taught to think kind of individualistically, that our first reflection upon looking at somebody else is to make this error and not realize that we just don't have all of the information. We jump to conclusions and we blame the other person, okay? So like a real simple example is, as a teacher in class, a student walks in late, 10, 15 minutes, and I can jump to this conclusion and think to myself, oh man, they're so disrespectful. Don't they even understand kind of what it's like to walk in late and kind of, how mean that is? And they're just a really like uncaring person, right? And so I resist to jump to that conclusion because perhaps the real story, and while coming into class is not something that we want to condone. It's not something that we want to have happen all the time. However, I don't need to jump to that conclusion because I know my students have very busy lives. Perhaps daycare didn't work out today. Perhaps transportation, there was a problem with the car. There are lots of things that happen in people's lives, and so it just doesn't do me any good to jump to that conclusion. If a person's consistently walking in late and I want to address that behavior, maybe I should talk to them as opposed to jumping to the conclusion. So with regards to mental illness, when I see someone struggling, when I see someone who's homeless, and when I jump to the kind of simple, easy notion that they're just lazy, or if they work harder, they would get ahead in life, that's just not taking all of the detail and the data into consideration as to what might actually be going on with that person. And the thing that's relevant then is that when I jump to that simple, easy conclusion, then I may not be willing to help them because I see it as their fault. I see it as their kind of unwillingness to work hard or things like that. When I understand that things like poverty and familial mental illness and a history of social strife, and when I understand that stress, large amounts of stress in a person's life, large amounts of stress in society, large amounts of stress in a family's life, large amounts of stress generationally over time can have dramatic effects on people's abilities and kind of willingness to feel it or see they can move forward. So this is super important that we don't jump to this fundamental attribution error as a conclusion. And it's exactly why we've studied the biopsychosocial for this whole entire semester. What's up biologically? What's up psychologically with the individual? What's up sociologically, socioculturally? How can I get a better picture of exactly what's happening? That will inform me about how I can move forward and maybe help them become more successful. All right? Thanks.